I want to get right to what happened overnight in Minneapolis because tensions continued to escalate there after another shooting involving a federal agent. Last night's incident came just a week after the deadly shooting of Renee Good. The Department of Homeland Security claims the agent shot an undocumented immigrant, this is a new instance, from Venezuela during a targeted traffic stop. That's DHS's explanation. They say that while trying to detain the man, the agent was attacked by two other people from a nearby apartment who, along with the migrant, attacked the officer with a snow shovel and a broom handle. Fearing for his life, the agent fired shots, they say, hitting the migrant in the leg. Again, all of this is according to DHS. The agent and the migrant were taken to the hospital. The two other people involved were taken into custody. Following that shooting, dozens of protesters gathered at the scene, confronting federal agents and swarming a Border Patrol vehicle. Fireworks were thrown at federal officers who responded with flashbangs and gas canisters. Meanwhile, we're also learning new details about the ICE agent involved in last week's fatal shooting in Minneapolis. Federal officials say the agent, Jonathan Ross, suffered internal bleeding to his torso following the incident that killed Renee Good, though the extent of those injuries has not been made public. Homeland Security confirms Ross was treated at a hospital and released the same day. However, we've all seen video from the scene, and it shows him walking away afterward. Secretary Kristi Noem says Ross believed he was acting in self-defense. He's not yet returned to work and is recovering in a secure location following reported threats. There's a lot to get to on the ground in Minneapolis. That's where we start with MS Now reporter Nnamdi Egwuonwu. Nnamdi, talk about what the latest is there. Last night looked really chaotic.
And Ali, we were there. We were there for hours last night as all of this information was coming out, as protesters increasingly began to gather. And I want you to see the street is empty. It has only been like that for a few hours, Ali. As early as about 2 hours ago, officers were still working to clear out this entire area. This entire block you see was filled with people. And that's where we saw several tense clashes between protesters and federal law enforcement personnel. And I can tell you to some of what we witnessed. You mentioned those fireworks. That was very real. These protesters were upset, they were angry, they were frustrating. We've been talking about how tensions have been mounting here in the week since Renee Good died specifically. We saw much of that boil over last night. Tear gas canisters were deployed several times by law enforcement personnel as they tried to get this situation under control. I will tell you, we were here, and I just hadn't seen anything like that. Certainly since I've been in Minneapolis, but just generally in a long time. I can't underscore just how violent things got. Law enforcement, again, working until very late last night in order to ensure people cleared out this way. They officially declared this an unlawful assembly late last night. The police chief did, and again, they worked into the early hours of this morning to create the scene you see today, where no one is out here anymore. But it took hours for them to accomplish that, Ali.
Took hours for them to accomplish that. And of course, it's really cold out there. So the fact that so many people were out on the streets, I think, is notable. And then, of course, the pleas from the mayor to just everyone try to stay calm, try to stay peaceful, use your right to protest, but don't give anyone an excuse to escalate. All of that is so important here. MS Now reporter Nnamdi Egwuonwu live with us from Minneapolis. Thank you so much. I know you're coming back up later on Morning Joe. We'll be listening to your reporting. I want to bring in now here on set with me White House reporter for Politico, Alex Gangitano. Alex, it makes you start to wonder, for an administration that has put such a premium on setting levels for ICE deportations, pressuring agents to deport and arrest as many people as they possibly can, is the point now in a place like Minneapolis that is clearly so strained and so emotional and the mood on the ground is so tense, is the chaos part of the point? Why is the administration not taking what I would assume is the rational view to say things seem like they're getting really dangerous for civilians and also for ICE officers? Why don't we just press pause instead of continuing to escalate?
Yeah, I mean, we saw last week, though, with the murder of Renee Good, is how the administration and how a lot of their allies, supporters, people online who voted for them took such a hard stance in support of that ICE agent, while people on the other side took the other side. It's become such a polarized issue, and this administration is so forthright in saying what's going on the ground. These protesters are in the wrong, these migrants are in the wrong, and we are in the right, period, no questions asked. And so I think in situations like this, that's how they approach it, not as, look how chaotic this scene is, maybe let's try to figure out a way to de-escalate. It's up to the mayor, it's up to the protesters, it's up to Governor Walz to figure out how to de-escalate. We're just in here trying to do our job. We've seen, a year of this administration focused so much on mass deportations, getting their numbers up. We know how focused they've been on just looking at numbers of how many people they've taken into custody, how many people they've removed from this country. So then when does that die down too? When do they feel like they've had a successful run of this? It's interesting also that this person involved in the shooting last night was a migrant as opposed to Renee Good. What does that mean for a response from the administration? And if anything, I think it will be even more aggressive towards supporting ICE agents later today.
I just also think it's important for us to talk about, the lack of humanity, I think, that has been evident on the ground in the way that the administration has continued to push forward on this. But then also when you take in tandem that the politics of it are not actually popular, it just leads you to question why they would continue doing this. And I wonder if your sources, I know Tom Homan was talking at the White House yesterday with reporters, I wonder if your sources have expressed any skepticism about what has really been the central policy and underpinning pushed by this White House, in large part by Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller. I mean, is anyone questioning if this should continue to be the path forward or not?
Right. We know that inside of DHS, there are people questioning that, is this the right strategy?
Yeah.
Should we be this aggressively causing situations like the Renee Good situation? I think after that, it opened a lot of eyes of things have really escalated, especially in Minneapolis where things are so polarized. Is this the right move here? But there's also no one willing to really speak up when you see a Secretary Noem saying, we're doing the right thing, doubling down on all of this. I think, if anything, they're going to be doubling down even harder. Of course, with Governor Walz, there is such a power struggle with this White House that I think they want to lean into. That I think, the people questioning are keeping quiet right now to such an extent because of how important, how personal this is to this White House to lean into these mass deportations.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I was even watching our colleague Jen Psaki last night, one of our analysts, our law enforcement analysts, saying there, I'm not really sure what the state of Minneapolis has done to warrant this kind of an incursion from federal law enforcement, other than the fact that their governor happens to also have been on the presidential ticket contested against President Trump and J.D. Vance just last year. I think the politics are so unfortunately intertwined with the deeply personal actions that we've seen on the ground there. And we're, of course, going to continue to stay all over it. But then, of course, you've also got what the White House is doing on the world stage. And President Trump is set to sit down today with Venezuelan opposition leader and 2025 Nobel Peace Prize winner Maria Corina Machado this afternoon at the White House. That meeting comes after the president snubbed Machado in the immediate aftermath of Nicolas Maduro's ouster, saying it would be tough, in his words, for her to be leader because she doesn't have the support or respect within the country. That was Trump's initial read. Machado, who won the Venezuelan opposition's primary in 2023 before being barred from the general election, has tried to extend many olive branches to President Trump, even offering to share her Nobel Peace Prize with him, a notion that organizers of the project reject. Meanwhile, Senate Republicans shut down a bipartisan effort to limit President Trump's military authority in Venezuela. The Senate voted 51-50 last night to block debate over a war powers resolution, the Vice President, J.D. Vance, breaking that tie. Republican Senators Josh Hawley and Todd Young said that they changed their votes after assurances from Secretary of State Marco Rubio that the U.S. would not deploy ground troops without notifying Congress. He promises. Senators Rand Paul, Susan Collins, and Lisa Murkowski continued to vote with Democrats to limit the president's power. I was pretty stunned by this yesterday, though we had started to get some breadcrumbs from senators the day before that maybe sands were shifting. How did the White House ultimately pull this off? Because I know President Trump made some rounds of very angry phone calls to Republicans, but then Marco Rubio again came in and seemed to placate some of his former colleagues on the Hill.
That's right. I talked with a senior White House official on Tuesday night, so before the Wednesday vote, and this person was very optimistic going into Wednesday. And, that leads to a lot of questions of why exactly do you feel like you can get two votes, not just, and they were already writing off Senator Rand Paul, who, of course, votes often against this administration, Senator Susan Collins, and who's very serious about the War Powers Act, and Senator Lisa Murkowski had already said that she's not changing her mind. So that only left these two options. But they were very optimistic, and they said that senior administration officials, Legislative Affairs Office, the works, including the president himself, was leaning on two things. One, what eventually flipped Hawley, which was we promise that we'll come to you if there's going to be boots on the ground.
And they wrote that in a letter. Okay.
Yes, and they have that written down. And then, two, that they feel like they've been really transparent with this Congress about what's going on in Venezuela. Of course, we know they went into Venezuela when they had discussions with Congress was after the fact. But I guess these members felt like that's a secure enough situation to be in, that after the fact, they've been a lot of communication. So it was very interesting how optimistic they are, because then just hours later, we were hearing from Senator Hawley that he was ready to shift his thinking on that. So really interesting, though, of what moves forward here in terms of the next steps with Venezuela.
Yeah, I get the sense that some of these Republicans were just looking for any excuse to not have to vote against an angry White House on this.
Right.
Ultimately, we're going to see, because Tim Kaine says he's going to bring up more resolutions like this, at least force the issue and make them grapple with the central question. But we'll see. Promises, promises. Mm-hmm. And for a Congress that says in some cases that the administration has lied to them, mostly Democrats saying that, we'll see where this goes. White House reporter for Politico, Alex Gangitano, thank you as always.